Will the coronavirus vaccine be effective against new mutant strains of coronavirus? That depends, and I'd like to explain. The short answer is in the short term, most likely yes, but in the long term, perhaps less so. Viruses mutate. That's obvious. There wouldn't be a coronavirus SARS-2 if there had not been mutations in the strains related to coronavirus SARS-1. Coronavirus would not have jumped species from bats or other animals to humans without mutations. Viruses in general mutate, and coronavirus, even though it possesses genes which will limit its mutation, uh, coronavirus will mutate. In the SARS-1 outbreak, it was observed that later strains of the virus were more communicable than earlier strains had been, so mutations improved the interaction between the spike protein and the human receptors. Although there were antibodies developed against SARS coronavirus 1 in case it ever came back again, since the spike proteins of SARS coronavirus 1 was only 79% identical to that of SARS coronavirus 2, most of the antibodies which had been developed against SARS CoV 1 were not effective against SARS CoV 2. That being said, it should remember that when our immune system makes antibodies against the spike protein, they would be polyclonal antibodies instead of monoclonal antibodies. So for example, in this sheep or in a human after getting the vaccine and producing spike proteins, the antibodies produced do not all bind to the same region of these spike proteins. Different immune cells, known as B lymphocytes, would develop different antibodies to bind to different parts of the spike protein. So even if a mutant strain of coronavirus had a variation in one region of the spike protein, many of the antibodies which bind to other regions of the spike protein would still probably be perfectly functional. Given enough time, especially with the influence of natural selection, new mutant strains of virus might develop which are resistant to the vaccine. But at least in the short term, vaccines are likely to be effective against new strains of virus which only vary slightly compared to the original strains against which the vaccines were developed.